I'm Jill Bennett. The question is, how do we prepare the students of today to be the digital leaders of tomorrow? We are going to tackle that very topic over the course of the next 2 days, and specifically in the next hour during our kickoff panel. We span the globe to build a diverse panel, and I think we did pretty well. We have educators and researchers, business leaders, and a student to round things out. They are changing the way classrooms work. They have pushed aside centuries-old notions of memorization, testing, and always having the right answer. And they've introduced new things into the classroom, such as life skills, teaching mindsets, problem solving, and student leadership. Let's get started. Google commissioned the Economist Intelligence Unit to take a look at exactly what skills we need to be teaching our students today to better prepare them for the future. And we're thrilled to have the editor of this report, Zoe Tabary, here, joining us to go through the key highlights of skills of the future. Zoe, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe Tabary, and I'm an editor at the Economist Intelligence Unit, which is the research arm of The Economist. Today, I'll be sharing insights from some research we conducted for Google. Earlier this year, Google approached us to investigate whether the skills taught in education systems are changing, whether so-called 21st century skills such as digital literacy, leadership, creativity are complementing more traditional ones such as numeracy and literacy, and whether those skills meet the needs of employers and society more widely. To that end, we conducted an advisory board to bring in expert advice on how to conduct our research program, and we also conducted qualitative interviews and quantitative surveys of teachers, students of 11 to 17 years old and 18 to 25 years old, and businesses to find out what's happening in education systems now. Before I discuss the research, I'd like to play you a short video introducing the key findings.
Evolving business needs, technological advances and new work structures are redefining valuable skills for the future. Problem-solving, teamworking and communication are the most needed skills in the workplace, according to surveys of executives, teachers and students by the Economist Intelligence Unit. But education systems aren't providing enough of these 21st century skills, and over half of businesses say a skills gap is hindering their performance. Nurturing skills of the future places new demands on teachers, who may not have the tools required to lead a more interactive class. Nearly half of them say the curriculum is too rigid to allow time for wider skills to be fostered. Meanwhile, students are becoming more independent, gathering information by themselves, according to 62% of teachers. Education systems seem to be struggling to keep up with the pace of technological change. Only 28% of 11 to 17-year-olds say their school is very good at using technology in lessons, and over 30% of teachers would like further training in digital literacy. Employers feel they should play a more active role in deciding what students are taught. They list improved access to company schemes or internships as the educational change which would most benefit their business. Countries all over the world, such as Bangladesh, Singapore and New Zealand, are devising innovative approaches to teaching and learning. As one expert puts it, ensuring students leave school with the ability to learn will prepare them for a world not yet known.
Problem-solving, teamworking, and communication, as you'll have seen in the video, and commonly known as 21st century skills, are the most needed skills in the workplace, according to our recent surveys of businesses, teachers, and students. But if problem-solving is to be prioritized as an educational goal, it needs to start early to be effective, according to experts. Emiliana Vegas, who was interviewed in the report, and who's the chief of the education division at the Inter-American Development Bank, said that the school systems that manage to embed problem-solving in the curriculum combine real-world context with information, for example, using math and science to solve practical problems as opposed to abstract ones. The value placed on teamworking in the surveys reflects the increasingly interconnected way in which we live our lives. Digital literacy, creativity, and their close cousin entrepreneurship were ranked less highly in the surveys, but are seen by businesses as becoming increasingly important in the next 3 years. Next slide. Although executives, teachers, and students agree as to which skills are most needed in the workplace, only a third of executives report that they are satisfied with the level of attainment of young people entering the workplace. Even more striking, over half say that a skills gap is hampering their organization's performance, and students and teachers paint a similar picture. Next slide. Part of the problem may simply be that education systems lack the capacity to teach a wider range of skills. Teachers in our surveys reported that the curriculum was too rigid to allow for time for wider skills than numeracy and literacy to be fostered. According to Sean Rush, who's the president and CEO of Junior Achievement Worldwide, an organization that helps teach entrepreneurship in schools, the difficulty to teach a wider range of skills reflects a lack of innovation in the system as much as a limited number of hours in the day. He thinks that the best way to teach 21st century skills is to embed them in the curriculum, as opposed to bolting them on as additional subjects which might require more time. So if you want to foster oral communication skills, for example, holding a debate in the context of a history lesson would be much more lively than in isolation. But this also means that teachers need to be given a certain degree of freedom in how they incorporate 21st century skills in the curriculum. Next slide, please. Technology has a central role to play in skills development. As many as 85% of teachers report that advances in IT are changing the way they teach. But education systems, as opposed to leading the technological change, appear to be struggling to keep up with it. Just over a quarter of 11 to 17-year-olds in our survey said that their school was very good at using technology in lesson, and digital literacy was the area where teachers would most like further training. A majority of teachers also feel that students have a better understanding of technology than they do, which is an inevitable consequence of the pace of change, and perhaps also a symptom of the fact that students are becoming more independent and able to gather information for themselves. Next slide. We asked employers what changes they would most like to see happening in education systems. Greater collaboration between school and industry appears to be key to improving students' readiness for work. Employers in our surveys feel that they should play a more active role in deciding what students are taught at university, and that their position as stakeholders in education should be made more explicit. They list improved access to company schemes and internships as the educational change that would most benefit their business, followed by broadening access to technology in schools and universities. Next slide. Our research also found that countries all over the world, from Bangladesh to Singapore and New Zealand, are devising innovative approaches to teaching and learning. A New Zealand-based program called the Manaya Kalani Education Trust is teaching 21st century skills in one of Auckland's most disadvantaged communities. It supports parents to buy a digital device, such as a tablet, for their child, and provides them with Wi-Fi access both at home and at school to allow students to follow an ongoing learning program in their own time, thus extending the learning day. Families still have to pay a small fee for the device, ensuring that they take a positive decision to support their child's learning throughout the program. Meanwhile, the schools are encouraged to adopt teaching techniques which promote group discussion and critical thinking skills. It's impossible to say what challenges will face students or what the workplace of the future will look like. The traditional classroom with rote learning at its core has had its day. Education must therefore concern itself more than ever with the development of skills to interrogate knowledge, to find it for oneself, and to respond to rapidly changing situations. Thank you.
Zoe, some really important research. I really enjoyed that report, and especially to note that businesses are saying, hey, look, we don't have all the skills that we need, the problem solving, the teamwork, the communication. And so we are going to be problem solving those very issues during this panel. And with that, I want to bring in Jouni Kangasniemi. He is a special advisor to the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland. And if you have not seen the headlines about the school systems in Finland, they're consistently recognized as one of the top school systems in the world. They focus a lot on teaching life skills to the students in even rewarding mistakes. And they're getting accolades for not only the work they're doing with students, but also with the teachers. And so Jouni is going to walk us through exactly how they are preparing students for the future.
Hi, happy to join you from Helsinki, sunny Helsinki. I try to build up some ideas on the top of what we just saw and heard, and it's not an easy task, but I will focus on two important aspects. First, I will discuss the importance of having a big picture and understanding that. Then I will build up on the future skills, and then I will end my short presentation on some of the lessons or questions that we've had when we've had many visitors coming to Finland, and I will share some of the ideas how we've responded to that. So first, the big picture. It's exciting how the world is so big, so complex. We can't predict what happens in the next day, next year, 10 years from now. There's lots of problems, but there's also lots of opportunities. So we all have limited views what's behind the next curve. But thanks to the technology, at least the world is getting smaller. I can speak to you from Finland, and we can be complementing to each other. Talking about the big picture, I'd like to share a short story that most of you might have heard before, of three men with eyes folded and then come and run into an elephant. One is embracing his hands around the elephant's foot and saying that there's something in front of me and I can hardly reach around it. And the next person is next to the belly and saying, no way, it's impossible because can't reach my hands around. And the third man is next to the tail and say that, you guys, I don't have a clue what you're talking about because I can keep the tail or whatever is in my hand. So the importance of having even broader vision, what we're going into. So what does it mean when we talk about education? In Finland, the main mechanism for steering education is through national core curricula. We do that in 10-year circles or cycles, and somebody says that we do it so that we can keep politicians a little bit away from the process and we can keep it more independent. But it's also a very good way of improving education because education takes time to evolve. We are coming to the target date, which is August 1st, 2016, when the new national core curricula is about to be adopted in Finland. The process is very creative and very collaborative. We involve in the designing of the national core curricula all the teachers, politicians, experts, teachers, parents, and also students, just to build on a shared view what the education should and could look like in the future. So in a way, we are kind of like sharing and collaborating and building up the image of the education. And this process is done in two levels. It's done in the national level, but also on the local level. And I think that's quite unique because we don't have any expert group that has closed door and closed windows when they prepare this document. So it's constantly exchanged between all the teachers and the experts finalizing the document. And in parallel, the schools or the education providers in Finland are designing their own localized curricula, which is based again on that national core curricula. So by the time the new curricula is adopted, everybody has to view and already knows how to implement it. And one of the visitors said that the best way is to just compile thoughts, what is best for the future, and something that you need to carry from the past. So coming to the next part, the future skills. What it means when the world is so unpredictable. I call that all what we need, or the thing that we need the most is learning. I don't know if you've heard the term before. Actually, I've invented it by myself. It means that learning to learn so that learning happens. And that involves lots of skills, will, motivation, and purpose for what you're doing. So any learner needs information and knowledge and skills and competence on how to learn, how to participate in learning communities, how to collaborate with your peers, how to build up on previous knowledge, how to analyze, how to listen, and even the meta skills that are necessary to learn new things. From teacher's point of view, that means that the teacher is not controlling the learning, but more like supporting and being more proactive with the students. It's also a motivational issue, and you end up co-learn with students. That's what the Finnish teachers are doing. And from a student's point of view, it means that learning is not remembering. It's more on understanding. It's not about having the right answers and being afraid of failing something. We all fail sometimes. But learning is about empowering yourself. So coming to the end, we've had so many visitors coming to Finland during the past few years. And I'd like to share just some questions that what we've heard from the visitors. First, they might ask that, do you punish your teachers if they don't follow the curricula? And we say that no, of course not, because they themselves have built the understanding for that. Lots of Americans come to Finland and then they ask that, do you have any secrets that you'd like to share with us? And I said again, no, we don't have any specific secrets. We just try to be as open as possible. But if I try to compare some ideas, how you see in US the system and how we see it in Finland, we might have less homework, less class hours, we keep breaks between the classes, and that all helps to learn new things. We don't test what you've learned, but we test or we just encourage learning. Teachers in Finland are highly valued, and we want to keep it so. They are the professionals of learning. So they themselves build up the atmosphere, and if they decide to do something in the classroom, they can decide what methods they use, what content they use in the classroom, and how they assess the learning. It's all up to them because they know how to best treat their groups. So the focus in us is on more personalized learning, encouraging collaboration among the students, bringing out the activity from the learner and assisting that one. So I think I'll finish at this point, just to remind you, keep your focus on the big picture, help them to learning to learn so that learning really happens, and value your teachers. Thank you.
Jouni, that was great. I especially liked how you were talking about the student-focused teaching and LERFing, which may just be my new favorite word of 2015. We'll have to have some t-shirts made up of that. But I want to touch on, you mentioned that the new curriculum is coming in August 1st, 2016. What you didn't mention is that you actually change the curriculum every 10 years, which is fantastic. I'm sure that's the envy of many countries and school systems out there, that you can adapt so quickly. And what's the advantage to that? I mean, certainly that you can stay ahead of the curve, I would imagine.
I would say that it takes approximately 10 years to implement your new ideas, make a very big, broad, systematic change. And also in the class level, I mean, it's rehearsing what the future looks like. And as I mentioned, at least I think I mentioned that way you keep the system stable enough so that it's not changing when new office comes into the power, which actually happened here just in April. But still, they build on what's been previously built, and then they see the importance of carrying all the decisions that they make. They should be so that they last at least that long span.
Terrific. Thank you, Jouni. And I'd like to open it up now and introduce our entire panel. We have out in LA, we're heading out there. We have Ken Shelton standing by, probably with a very large cup of coffee because it is very early out there. Good morning, Ken. He is an educator. He was in the classroom for a good 20 years. He is also a trainer, a Google certified teacher, a designer, and a speaker. And if you have not seen his TED Talk, I highly recommend it. You definitely should. We're going to head out to another region of California, heading north now to Mountain View, where we have Jaime Casap. He is standing by there. He is the Global Education Evangelist for Google. And what that means is that he works with parents and educators, has been doing so for many years, to help work on reshaping curriculums. And his particular focus, one big push, is problem solving, introducing that into the curriculum and how important that is. And we've certainly heard that from the report earlier, that that's pretty vital for the businesses out there. So welcome, Jaime. And now we are heading to the UK. We have Nicole. Nicole is a 6th form student. So essentially, if she was in the US, that would be an upperclassman in high school. And she's joining us from the Isle of Portland Aldridge Community Academy. And because it's a mouthful, it's usually known as IPACA. So welcome to all 5 of you. It's great to have you here. And we are going to work on what we can do to reshape education and really build out those skills for the future. But first, I want to roll a video because we put that very question to a panel of other experts out there to see what they would do to reshape education, and we got more than a few responses. Let's roll the video.
Absolutely learning all the skills that I need for a future job. Those skills include collaboration with others, communication with my peers and managers, and the capability to set and achieve goals.
Yes, I do think I'm learning all the skills I need because they're teaching me how to code, so if I want to be a teacher that teaches coding and stuff like that, I know how to code.
I do not think we're learning the stuff that we need to learn because they don't really prepare us to go out into the real world. They don't prepare us how to, or teach us how to pay our taxes, how to pay our bills, or our electricity bills, or water bills. And so they're just kind of just throwing us out there.
I do think I am learning the skills that I need because to become a doctor, I need to learn about the human body and science and know about the human body.
Really, you're learning the basics and probably the most important stuff you will be using. It's not like you're jumping ahead to the complex stuff.
Our future jobs may not even exist yet, and with the rate of progression of technology, who really knows what careers may be available in the future? However, I do believe that life skills of solving problems, communicating, and pushing personal boundaries will always be important.
That was nicely done. All right, let's start in on the questions. And Ken, I'm going to throw the first pitch out to you in LA. Let's start with this. You believe that we need to focus on teaching mindsets, not skills. Can you give an example of that?
Yes, and good morning and hello to everybody out there. So my perspective on that is that skills, they can become obsolete. Skills are generally have a finite time period in which they can be useful or applied. And if you look at the way we learn and the way we could potentially learn, and more importantly, what we could, the culture or the environment that we could have our students in, is focusing on the mindset. And the three big areas of the mindset that I have referred to in the TEDx talk, and I generally refer to in conversations, are that of an explorer, an entrepreneur, or an engineer. And I'll give you an example. My explorer attitude was I wanted to leave the country back in the mid-90s and go to a country of which I had to, one, take out my passport, and two, English was not the primary language. And so I got off a plane at the airport in France and looked around at the signage and realized that I didn't have a skill set needed to be able to enhance my experience there in France, because at the time I couldn't speak French. My explorer attitude was I'm still going to go to the museums and still go around Paris and other cities that I visited, because there was more reward than risk, even though I lacked the skill set of the language. When I got back home, my entrepreneurial mindset was, now you need to develop that skill set, which was going to college, or taking French language classes at the local junior college. And so even though I was not taught the skills of being able to speak French in high school or even in college, I still had the mindset and the wherewithal to acquire those skills, which became useful in subsequent trips to France and other French-speaking countries.
A new way of thinking. I like that a lot. All right, Jaime, I want to toss one to you. I know that you cringe when people ask your children, what do you want to do when you grow up? Because you want the question to be centered around problem solving. What problem do you want to solve? What are the skills and abilities you need to get there? But what's the reality of introducing problem solving into a curriculum?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting to start this conference off today. But you're right. I cringe anytime someone asks my 13-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because we've identified a couple of times already this morning that there's a good chance that the job doesn't exist yet, that there's a good chance that we don't know what the problems are that we're going to solve. So we have to teach our kids how to go through a problem-solving process. So instead of asking kids what you want to be when you grow up, we should be asking our kids what problem you want to solve. And then the follow-up question is, what do you think the knowledge, skills, and abilities are to solve that problem? And where can you get those knowledge, skills, and abilities? And it opens up the world to students to think about where they get the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Not just what they can do in school, but what can they do after school? What can they do online? Who can they follow on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Google+? What videos should they be watching? What websites they should be subscribed to? But when you do that, when you go from where do you want to be when you grow up to, what problem you want to solve, you're in that magic triangle that Daniel Pink often talks about for motivation, right? Which is you're building autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And so how do we do that in our schools is what that next question is. And what we're starting to see is a more student-centric focus for learning models. And I think that's where we get to, where we're not answering questions for our students, but we're starting off with that blank slate. What is the problem? Define the problem. And then that project-based learning that we're seeing in schools is taking care of implementing that problem-solving based education model that we're seeing pop up all over the world, really.
At what age would you say we need to be introducing that into the curriculum?
I say as early as possible, right? I have a little baby. I have an 8-month-old. And one of the most fascinating things, the highlight of my day is that time I get to spend with her in the evenings where I watch her brain just problem solve, right? It's just constantly problem solving, like everything from like, how do I get my, my teeth around that phone that he has, to how do I get across the room? That problem solving dynamic is inherent in us. We have that. And so I think we can, right from the beginning, start talking to students and have them figure out what problem solving what looks like, because they're trying to not just solve a problem, but identify what the problem is. And that's as critical as a skill that we need for students than anything.
Okay, thanks, Jaime. And Nicole, I'm going to ask you the next question, because we've been hearing all of these ideas about problem solving and teaching mindsets focused on student leadership and life skills. What's your response when you hear all of these different ideas?
When I think about, obviously, sort of problem solving and what life skills I'd like to learn, it's straight away everything when I grow up, what I need to know. I mean, I was at work a couple of days ago, and it's funny, it was a fridge, and they asked me to order it, and I actually didn't know how to order it. I didn't know which one first in terms of dairy, raw meat. They were saying about perhaps I might get taxed. How do I get my tax back? That's the sort of stuff that I want to learn when I'm at school. Obviously, everything else like English, maths, and that I still need to know. But it's just those extra sort of life skills stuff that I need to learn, that I need to know. So when I sort of leave school and I'm on my own 2 feet, I sort of know how to go about it. I'm not just completely lost.
So it sounds as though you do want teachers to be teaching a little bit differently to address some of the issues that you want.
Yeah, obviously, I love how I'm taught at the moment anyway, but just some extra sort of boosters on how to sort of live life when you're a bit older, I'll just appreciate it a lot, because obviously you're just sort of so lost when you grow up.
Sure, I mean, that will help you prepare better for the future. That all seems very important. Now, I know you went to 2 different schools, but when you walked in the doors of IPACA, you had a little bit of an eye-opening experience. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been to quite a few schools in my life, but in terms of secondary sort of education, in terms of sixth form, I went to a college and I just found it completely wasn't for me. It didn't really have the support and the push that I got from sixth form. And then I came to IPACA, obviously I walked through the doors, and from the outside it does not look like a sixth form whatsoever, but obviously the inside is just so great. I mean, like I just can't really explain it. They've got different rooms. You've got 3 different rooms. It's like a New York room, London room, Sydney room, and they all have the wallpapers on it. On the sides, there's sort of iPads where you can book your room and stuff. It's just everything to sort of help you learn.
That's great. Thank you, Nicole. All right, now I want to move over to Jouni. I think a lot of people out there, educators, are listening right now, and they're just feeling a little daunted about what is the first step that they can take. So I thought maybe if you could run through some of the first steps that they could take, even starting on Monday, to emulate some of the good practice seen in Finland. What would you suggest, Jouni?
If I continue what I said about LERFing, I prepared this one. And what it takes that you ask one simple question from your students. How do you learn? One Finnish teacher asked the same question from her students, and what happened? She threw out all the chairs, all the desks, brought in all the coaches, redecorated the whole classroom, and redid the way she thought and organized all the learning. And I mean, with that simple question, I mean, you can make very big things if you dare to. At least in Finland, it is possible because, as I said, we trust highly on the teachers' professionalism. They know what they are doing. And the good thing in the end was that in the end of the semester, even the learning outcomes rose with that class. And in the end of each day, she found it quite difficult to send the kids away back to their homes because they loved to stay at school.
That is what teachers want to hear. That's terrific. All right, Jaime, we've heard about Finland, and we know that it's one of the top school systems in the world and what they're doing to improve. But the reality is that doesn't happen everywhere. So you've been advocating that education is not broken, but it just needs to be reshaped. How does it need to be reshaped?
Yeah, well, let's start with the idea that I like to be a glass half full kind of guy, and I look at education and see what it's accomplished over the last 100 and 150 years. And the key message there that is education isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, and it's doing it better than ever. Right? In 1910 in the U.S., the the graduation rate was like 6%, and today we're pushing 80%. The content that we teach today is 10x better than it was 150 years ago. What I'm asking us to do is to do exactly what we did 100, 150 years ago, and ask ourselves, what does the education model need to look like to support the economy of the future? The knowledge-based, network-based economy. What is it that we need to do in our schools? And so that's what I want us to make sure that we focus on, is what do we need to do to reshape education to support that economy? So that's my focus.
Okay, and a slight follow-up to that question, I want to pose this to Ken. You've been hard at work with thousands of educators. What seems to be working out there?
There's a lot that's going on literally around the world that I would say is working quite well. And if I were to encapsulate a couple of examples into that, first of all, a lot of educators are recognizing the importance of technology, but not technology as a tool, but technology as an integral part of any learning environment, and utilizing, and in fact, we even saw it in some of the research, of the three areas that are identified as the most important, is teachers are using it for communication, collaboration, and then networking. Here in California, one of the things that I can share with all of our viewers is that a number of years ago, our state superintendent put together a task force, which I had the privilege of serving on, and the whole theme of that task force was No Child Left Offline. And it was a multi-pronged approach of looking at how can we in California leverage everything from our business relationships with the companies in Silicon Valley. How can we look at higher ed teacher prep programs? How can we look at school districts? How can we look at everything from infrastructure to literally what goes on in the classroom with students, and provide a meaningful connection in every learning environment here in California? And one example I do want to share with everyone is a close friend of mine in Northern California, who actually recently published a book, is that he adopted Google's 20% time and has applied it in his classroom. And the beauty of the way he's applied it is not, oh, here we're going to take 20% of our time to do something. It's more fostering, again, the mindset to where the students are working on projects of where they develop that entrepreneurial mindset of, okay, and even borrowing what Jaime shared, what problem do I want to solve? And then how can I apply that or do that? And that is the part of that is the integral part of their 20% time project. So I think there's a lot going on. I would love to see more educators share out what they're doing rather than closing the doors to their classroom and things of that nature, putting it out on social media, and to borrow even what Jaime just shared, which I'm in full agreement. The glass is more than half full. There's just a lot of stories out there that we don't know yet.
And I think we're certainly hearing that student independence is such a key part of student leadership. All right, Zoe, I know you buried yourself in this research for so long. If you can talk about two innovative examples from around the world of people teaching students the life skills they need to succeed.
Sure. Well, what really struck me in the research and in the conversations I've been having with educators is that innovation in education often happens in the most unsuspected places. So I mentioned the New Zealand example of one of Auckland's most disadvantaged communities, but Bangladesh's own national education policy at its core gives teachers training into how to incorporate technology in lessons, and that's accompanied by an increase in group sessions, Q&As, and project-based learning. So students, for instance, are able to ask questions verbally, of course, to teachers, but also via live messaging software, which ensures that shyer students who might not necessarily speak up get the opportunity to do so. Another example which I found really interesting was one taking place in the US. It's a public charter school in Washington, D.C., which takes an interdisciplinary approach to skills by embracing real-life projects. So a group of first grade students were involved in running a snack bar for the school and raised money to build a children's library in a homeless shelter. And by conducting surveys on customer satisfaction, finding out which snacks were most popular, and also liaising with the shelter, they were, as a result, able to kind of develop their own skills, such as problem solving, communication, and even entrepreneurship, which I think is pretty amazing for at that age and that level of education.
It certainly is. And with that, I'm going to go to our student, Nicole, and ask you, if you could tell me about a time where you felt as though school prepared you to be a digital leader.
I mean, I've had loads of experiences with this school now about being a digital leader. I mean, with one of our exams coming up, part of it is to create a solution. So we have a problem which is via sort of like the internet or to do with computers, and we have to create a solution for it. So obviously that was sort of quite challenging. Obviously, luckily we had all our sort of classmates, our teacher, and that to help us, but that was definitely a key point that helped us become a digital leader. Another one is our school across the road. Whenever they have events going on, we sort of always go across. We have a certain amount of iPads. We'll always record it, make little short videos about just anything they're really doing. So my school really does help me becoming a digital leader.
That sounds it. That's great. All right, it is time to open up to our audience and pull in some of these questions. They're pouring in, so I want to be sure we can get to as many as possible. And the first one is for Jouni, and Melissa wants to know, what is an area you are still trying to improve?
At least several areas. One is that we'd like to bring back the joy of learning, having learning a fun, although it might be hard as well. Expanding the learning spaces or the concept of learning environment. I mean, we've had such a long history for sitting in the classrooms, and we know that and we've heard about that learning also happens out of school and a lot, and to use that one. And also, I mean, I always invite all these fluent speakers from abroad. I mean, in Finland, it's much more simple to talk. I mean, when you just say what you say and that's it. But I mean, just to express your views more holistically and being able to build on that. Personalized learning, hard questions, hard challenges, but I think we'll manage.
Well said. All right, the next question goes to Zoe, and this is from Emily. What did you find most surprising in your research?
Well, it was particularly interesting to me in the research that a lot of students are taking it into their own hands to make up for deficiencies within the education system. So in our survey of 18 to 25-year-olds, although a minority of students think that their education system has provided them with the right skills to enter the workplace, a majority were confident or very confident about their future career prospects, which reveals a bit of a dichotomy. I think part of that may be, particularly in developed countries, that some students are turning to private tuition to better their chances and thus making them less likely to attribute their skills to formal education. But mostly I think it's that students are becoming more independent and able to gather information for themselves. In our survey of 11 to 17-year-olds, so much younger students, one of the changes that students most wanted to see in education was lessons where they could talk about their own ideas, so they want more involvement. Now, to be absolutely clear, I don't think that this diminishes the teacher's role in the classroom. It perhaps just changes it from imparting knowledge to teaching students how to work with that knowledge, so in explaining, filtering, and sharing knowledge.
All right, and we have another question that's been coming in from several people, the same question. Corey was the first one in with it. So Corey wants to know, what is the most important skill? Can you have just one important skill? So I'm going to toss this first over to Ken.
The most important skill, I would say there really isn't one. In fact, we already saw, and I pulled up the graphic here, we saw in the research that 51% of the executives say that new employees, let me read it, 51% of executives say a skills gap is hampering their organization's performance. So I wouldn't say that there's any one specific skill. However, what I would say, again, going back to the mindset, is what is the mindset of those employees to acquire the skills to at least bridge or reduce that gap. One of the most important skills, if you want to use that term skill, is the ability to find where that gap can be filled. And that goes into a whole nother area of, digital literacy, being able to identify the most valuable resource to acquire the knowledge, which then translates to the skill set. And things of that nature. But I would say that there really isn't any one important skill. Again, for me, it's more what is the mindset, since skills can always be acquired.
And Nicole, what's your response to that? Do you think there is just one skill, or that you need more?
No, I do completely agree. There's not just one skill at all. I mean, there's so much. There's no way I could ever sort of narrow it down to just one skill that I would want or need for the future.
Okay, and this one is for Jaime. Amanda wants to know, as we move into a more online, technical-driven society, what skills of the past do you see becoming less important? And as educators, are there certain skill sets we should be focusing on acquiring?
Yeah, and I can kind of wrap that into the previous question, which is what is the one skill? And I think there. If I would take on that challenge and had to pick one, I would say collaboration is the most important one. We talk about collaboration in education a lot, but we don't really mean it, right? Education, the way it's set up today, is set up as a single-player sport. It's my 13-year-old who gets homework, gets assignments, takes tests. Imagine as a teacher, you hand out a test to a group of kids, and at the end of that test, 2 kids come up to you holding the test together saying, we decided to combine our skill set and work on this test together. What would your reaction be as a teacher? And in reality, that's the world that we live in, right? Real collaboration is about understanding that your part is part of a greater sum, that you're not alone in this world, that you can find people that you can compare and contrast your skill set with and work on problems together, that you're not bringing a whole solution, you're bringing part of that solution. The real collaboration is about understanding that you're part of a greater sum. Real collaboration is the ability to ask really good questions, and the potential to change your mind based on what's presented to you and what's in front of you, and being able to build consensus and drive forward on solutions. And I'm not saying that that's how we should do everything, but that's a critical skill. I take comfort in understanding that I don't have all the solutions, but I have my skill set that I can combine with other people's skill sets to create what that solution is. So I think that's where if I would focus on one thing, I would think that focusing on teaching collaboration is important. And we're starting to see this a lot with project-based learning. Project-based learning is really about collaboration. And so that's what's exciting to me, and hopefully we'll see that in the future. In terms of a skill that we no longer need, I would say we don't have to memorize phone numbers anymore. I remember when we used to have to memorize 10 people's phone numbers when we were kids. We don't have to do that anymore. So memorization becomes a commodity. Information becomes a commodity because it's at our fingertips, right? So like I think Zoe said as well, the idea is that we no longer have to teach kids information because information is at our fingertips. Information becomes a commodity. There's no value to it. What is valuable is taking that information and converting it into intelligence. And that's what our educators are helping students do, is convert that information into real intelligence.
And I like the highlights on the collaboration. Ken, I'm going to give you this one because this is highlighting some of your experience in the classroom. This is from Matt. He wants to know, how can we inspire our veteran teachers to think differently about how they approach their subject?
That's a great question. I've had the privilege of chatting with a number of veteran educators literally around the world, and usually the first thing I ask them when they share with me their personal stories about how, they feel like either one, that their teaching methodologies are outdated, or they aren't sure about their own confidence in the way that they're approaching their subject matter, is I always encourage educators, the first thing to look at is think back, imagine back to the time when you first started working in education and you decided that you wanted to become a teacher. What was your thought process? What was your motivation for that? And then more importantly, why did you choose the subject matter that you chose when you first started? And that should be the basis or the roots for how you adapt and innovate throughout the remainder of your career, whether you identify yourself as a veteran or even if you're a first-year teacher. I think a lot of times that we can get caught up in the minutia of, getting through standards, getting through testing, getting through all these things, and a lot of times in doing that, we lose some elements of that passion, that energy, and that fervor that we started off with. And whether you're a 30-year veteran or a 1-year veteran, hopefully you'll still be able to maintain the degree of enthusiasm and energy that brought you to education, and look at ways, to me, I think with technology, it's even better because it's always changing, and that means that there's always more learning opportunities and ways in which we can incorporate, this world of information and world of accessibility within our subject matter. But I still think the most important thing for any teacher is looking at the roots of the passion and the energy and what brought you to education and your subject matter right from the beginning, and that can serve as a motivational basis going forward.
Nicely said. All right, and for Jouni, we have a question from Tanya. She wants to know, what is the best way to give students the skills they need without skipping on the curriculum that needs to be covered?
Very good question. My advice would be that the curricula twists to so many angles. If I give you an example, like one of the new skills that we try to introduce in our new curricula is coding. But I mean, in some countries they think that now we should train all teachers to code. But like in Finland, I've seen that some of the teachers have made lots of new invention how to do that. They ask that, or they combine that with playing with kids. They ask them to please design a toy that moves. And then in the lower classes, it's very mechanical. But in the upper classes, you bring in the robotics and the computing skills quite closely. But in addition to that, she or he might ask that make an advertisement out of your new toy. And not to finish on that, but also keep a diary what you were doing. And now I'm referring again to that the learning skills are the most important, and you need to practice those, you need to rehearse and make them visible so you understand how you yourself learn it. So, I mean, in the end, all issues in the curricula are twistable.
I like that. All right, for Zoe, and then also I'm going to have Jaime answer this question as well, but we'll start with Zoe. Brendan asks, with all the pressure to teach standards and teaching to the test, how do we bring these other skills in?
That's a really good point. I think one of the things that came out of the report and that educators, but also policymakers seem to agree on, was that it doesn't make sense to add many more subjects to the curriculum, because then you end up being with one that's that goes in very little depth into each subject. So the consensus really seems to be on taking an interdisciplinary approach to skills. I think to your point about standards, I think we need to take a step back and move away from rote learning. Education systems often teach students how to succeed, but they don't teach them how to fail, or they don't portray failure as a positive thing. And I think in real life situations, particularly entrepreneurship and young people wanting to start their own business, failure can sometimes be a good thing. After failing twice or 3 times, you might then succeed on the 4th time. And finally, for teachers, I think what needs to change is to inculcate these new types of skills and these skills for the future. Teachers need more training. They've requested it in our surveys, particularly in areas such as digital literacy. But more importantly, I think they also need to be given more freedom by education systems to teach skills in their own classroom. So just a higher degree of freedom in how to incorporate 21st century skills.
Jouni has certainly talked about it in Finland. Hang on one second, Jaime. I just want to make a point about the mistake aspect, because they actually reward mistakes in Finland. You make a mistake and you get a reward, but that teaches kids that they can continue to try and they're not afraid of failing. And Jaime, yes, if you can continue on that point.
Yeah, just a quick point on that. My daughter used to be a swimmer, and she swam during high school. She was really good at it. But when she was a little kid, she had a tough time with starting late, right? She would jump in the pool like a second after everyone else would jump. And so because she was afraid to false start, she was afraid to fail. And what I did is I told her, for every false start that she did, I'd give her $100. Right, and the idea was that it was a reward for the failure, and so I can see that point why it works. But to answer the question about assessments, we have to ask ourselves, why do we have assessments, and what's the outcome of assessments? And I think when we look at the outcome of assessments, what we want is accountability. We want to make sure our kids are doing well. We want to assess them, and it totally makes sense that we want to know how our kids are doing. But maybe, given this new world, given technology, given what we can do, there might be better ways of doing that, as opposed to doing some kind of standardized test that we do every year where we can't get real good feedback on, that isn't very useful. How do we convert that kind of assessment into a performance-based assessment where we're constantly getting feedback, just like we do in sports and in the real world, that we can constantly get feedback and do assessments for our kids, that assessments come from each other, where students can assess each other, where students can assess themselves, right? There are tons of ways of doing this where we can get that accountability, we can get that assessment on how kids are doing, but we want to work harder on building performance-based assessments rather than these stagnant assessments that we do once a year. And I think that's where we need to work towards. Now, given the world that we live in from a how perspective, because we wanted to how, there are a number of school systems in the country, and I can point out High Tech High, Science Leadership Academy, Boston Tech, others that don't teach to the test, but yet their kids pass those tests with unbelievable flying colors. And the reason why is because they take those things and incorporate it into the project-based curriculums that they use. They don't necessarily teach to the test, but they make sure they're covering those subjects in what they do.
To your point, we have someone from High Tech High who's going to be out in one of our panels a little bit later talking about how they empower students and they don't teach towards the tests. I like that. All right, our next question is for both Ken and Jouni. I'll start with you, Ken. Megan wants to know, is there a specific book or resource you would suggest for getting started with some of these ideas, such as project-based learning?
Yeah, the single best resource I always recommend to any educator is accessibility through social media. You can Google that, you're going to get a gazillion answers. You can do a search on Amazon, you're going to get books and things of that nature. But, for example, on Twitter, there is a PBL chat. So I would say the best resource is the human resource. It's reaching out to the community, reaching out through social media, and identifying what are your specific areas that you're looking to, in this case, incorporate project-based learning, whether it's a grade level or subject matter, and then identifying that so that you can build essentially a solid network of connections with other educators who either have utilized effectively project-based learning in a similar environment or who have a similar interest in doing projects maybe that are similar to what you have. So in short, I think the single best resource is the human resource and networking through the use of social media.
And Jouni, would you agree social media is the way to go, or is there a particular book you would recommend?
I would say that that's the way to go, and especially just throw yourself into the unexpected and tell that to your students and make that like a co-learning experience. You might learn something really exciting things, and even your students might find out some very interesting elements. But I mean, besides that, I mean, the internet is full of experience and materials to start with. But I mean, go with the flow as soon as possible and see what happens.
Right, these are things we can start immediately on Monday. All right, for Jaime and Nicole, this will be, both of you will be answering this. We'll start with Jaime. This is from Colleen. How can schools help students learn about and participate in world issues such as poverty or justice?
I get to pitch one of the organizations that I'm a board member of. There's an organization called New Global Citizens, and here, based in the U.S., they teach global competency skills to high school students, because I think the reason I'm on the board is because I strongly believe in global competency skills. What we're really building, I don't even like the term college and career ready, right? What we really want to do is build a generation of global competent problem solvers who are lifelong learners, right? That's what I want my kids to be. And so understanding, we talked earlier about the world, the world is getting bigger, not necessarily smaller, because it's more complex. We need to understand what social issues are happening all over the world. And I believe that we need to incorporate into our curriculums, at least here in the US. I think other places in the world do a much better job of the global competency skills. But here in the US, making sure that we understand, what are the big problems facing the world, and how are local solutions covering those problems around the world. And so that's absolutely critical, is to make sure that that's built into the curriculum as well, that we're building those global competency skills around culture, around understanding, around social issues, and around making sure that we recognize that the problems that we're solving aren't just necessarily these big global problems, but there are problems at a local level as well that local communities are solving.
All right, and Nicole, have you had any experience at IPAC? Have you been introduced to some of the world issues there?
No, I can't really say massively that I know a great big deal about loads of world issues, but I completely agree that is something that we really do need to sort of bring into education. I mean, as a student, what really would help me is knowing this stuff, what's going on around the different world, because obviously that's going to affect how I learn, that's going to affect what I might be doing for the future. I mean, it can help me learn as well. I do think it's a massively important thing that we need to know.
Okay, and this is for Zoe. A question from a viewer named Ken. Ken says, do you see a danger that businesses may narrow the focus of the learning for our students, such that critical thinking and creativity are compromised?
I don't think so. I think that also to one of the earlier questions, businesses or teachers and students, for that matter, in the surveys, didn't identify so much one single skill as being more important than others. I mean, problem solving was marginally on top, followed by team working and communication, but other skills like critical thinking and then, as I said, creativity and entrepreneurship were seen as being increasingly more important. I think what businesses recognized, and this came through mostly in the qualitative interviews, is that there is only so much that education systems can teach in terms of real world situations. So businesses in our report recognize that they also themselves need to play an increased role in teaching those skills on the job, not just relying on graduates to be expected to know everything when they start. So they themselves playing a role in bridging that skills gap that they highlighted.
All right, and this one is for Ken and then Jouni. Ed wants to know, is it specific skills that are important or more dynamic traits such as adaptability and flexibility, as we don't know what the future will bring? I know what Ken's going to say. Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, it's dynamic traits by all means. That embodies the mindset mentality. As things change, some of the things I love sharing with my colleagues that I work with, as well as educators around the world, is that life is dynamic, life is not static. And so therefore, the being adaptable, being flexible, guess what those fit? Those fit the explorer mentality. So it is definitely having dynamic traits so that we can be adaptable, be flexible. The other thing is that with technology, there's so much out there and there's so much that is accessible that being able to look at information in different ways, looking at, even like what Jaime said, being able to look at problems in different ways, which, by the way, is the engineer mentality, certainly is what's needed the most.
Okay. And also over to Jouni. Do you believe that there are specific skills that are important, or is it dynamic traits such as adaptability and flexibility?
Yeah, very good question. I think that since we don't know what kind of jobs there are in the future, so we don't know what specific skills are needed. So obviously it's very dynamic and fluid skills that you need.
All right, and here's someone pushing to be the best. We have, this is for Jaime from Ben. How can I, as an educator who works with technology every day, become the most innovative in my field?
That's a great question. So let's start with the idea that what we need more than anything in education is a culture of iteration and innovation, right? Sometimes in education we look for some magic solution or magic model that all the schools then can replicate. And in reality, what we need is iteration and innovation. And so what I would say in terms of how do you build that skill set is to continue to have that mindset, to have the mindset of innovation. We've got to keep in mind that technology is not, I do a lot of presentations and I start with this idea that education is a silver bullet, and that what we need to do is make sure that education continues to be that silver bullet. I never say that technology is the silver bullet. Technology is not. Technology is an enabling and supporting capability. Our job as technologists is to make that technology easy to use and visible and manageable and scalable. And so what we want our innovative teachers to be able to do is to take that technology and embed it into what they want to do in their classrooms, but ask those critical questions. What else can I do? How do I push the envelope? And so it's not necessarily understanding what technology is next, or what app is next, or what social media channel everyone is on. It's more about understanding that concept of iteration, that idea that innovation comes from constant iteration. And so we want to make sure that our teachers are looking at technology not as the end all, but as a tool, as an enabling and supporting capability that they can use in their classrooms.
All right, thank you, Jaime. And that is going to end our audience questions. Thank you so much to our viewers for some of those terrific questions and some tough ones. Thankfully, we had the right experts on the panel to actually answer all of them. And just to highlight a few points from the panel, we certainly talked a lot about problem solving. We're hearing that not only the importance of that from educators, but also from the businesses that are seeing that as one of the skills that's really lacking. We talked about collaboration and teaching mindsets, teaching life skills as well, and just that real focus on student leadership. So really backing away from memorization and always having the right answer, and just rewarding those mistakes. That's very important. And a big, huge thank you to our panelists. You bring a lot of knowledge to the table. So I want to thank you first over in the UK to Zoe and Nicole, and also over in Helsinki to Jouni, and then moving out to the West Coast here, we had Ken and also Jaime. So thank you so much for your insight and your time on this.